Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. A bit of housekeeping before we begin. The presentation is being recorded and all lines have been muted. If you have any questions, please let us know. We'll follow up through email due to the time of the webinar. I'd like to introduce our esteemed speakers. Our first speakers from Michelman are Tricia Mueller, ERP Manager, and Zaki Ahmed, Senior JDE Developer. We are also honored to have AJ Shafano, Product Manager for Oracle JD Edwards. And final speaker is Brian Beck, our Senior Developer here at Magic Software. Without further delay, here's Tricia.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the webinar. I wanted to take just a minute and tell you a little bit about Michelman. So Michelman is a global manufacturer of environmentally friendly materials that offer solutions for coatings, for printing and packaging, and also for industrial manufacturing markets. Michelman is a family-owned business that just recently celebrated 70 years of business. We are headquartered in Cincinnati, Ohio, and we have a really intense focus on sustainability. We started on JD Edwards in 1999 and recently upgraded to 9.2 in November of 2017. Well, Michelman started to look at what tools were in the market to successfully integrate JD Edwards to Salesforce, and we selected the Magic XPI software because of its ease of execution and its familiarity with not only JD Edwards, but also some of our other third-party applications. We had a gap when we first implemented Salesforce in the measuring of the cost to send a sample order to a customer and then tying that sample order cost to any future revenue. So in our integrations with Salesforce, we wanted to tackle this primary gap first. Previously, we had no reporting that we could validate against. The old sample database was using ASP code, and we didn't have any developers that we wanted to spend time using that code. So we decided to start gathering the requirements to integrate the sample sales order with a request out of Salesforce, and then based on that approval of the request, then that would integrate the sample order in JD Edwards. So we eliminated any manual order entry from the customer service team, and we also were able to keep both JD Edwards and Salesforce in sync by sending that request from Salesforce to JD Edwards, and then the order number that was created for the sample order from JD Edwards back to Salesforce. So I think now we're going to turn it over to Ryan, and he's going to give us some background on Magic and the Magic XPI software.
Well, Magic Software is a company that's been empowering customers around the globe for more than 35 years with smarter technologies that deliver a better user experience and meeting their application development and integration needs. Magic has been in business since about 1983, and we're publicly traded on the NASDAQ stock exchange under ticker symbol MGIC. We posted revenues of $258 million in 2017, and actually in 2018 we hit $284 million for about a 10% growth year over year. We have 24 offices worldwide in all kinds of different countries, over 2,000 employees, about 1,300 global partners servicing thousands of corporate customers, and they have millions of end users that are using Magic technologies. We have alliances with all kinds of global IT leaders such as IBM, Microsoft, Oracle, Salesforce, SAP. We actually are gold partners with Microsoft and SAP, but with Oracle, we're actually platinum partners. There's a lot of reasons for that. We have Oracle validated integration for both JD Edwards World and Enterprise One on the newest 9.2 and newest version of World. And we have a long history of integration with JD Edwards going back years, and the customers with implementations of Magic XPI integrating JD Edwards to all kinds of different applications out there. Magic isn't just a software company. We have a full array of professional services to both support and deliver your implementations. So we offer strategic consulting, integration, design and delivery, training on our products, project management, application development, and service level agreements.
Hi, my name is Zaki Ahmed, and I've been working for Michelman for about 2 years now as a JD Edwards technical resource. In my part of the presentation, I'm going to show you a demo on how easy it is to create an orchestration. Before that, I just want to go over a little bit about our business case and a little overview on what orchestrations really are. So the business case that we had was to integrate sample orders that are entered in Salesforce and that are to be passed into JD Edwards real time, and to get a response back from JD Edwards that an order has been entered successfully in Salesforce. If there are any errors, then Salesforce should be able to show those errors. Also, not all orders that are entered in Salesforce were to be sent over to JD Edwards, so there was some filter that we need to put in place, and there was to be some data transformation that had to happen since Salesforce data doesn't always correlate to JD Edwards master data, such as unit of measures, date formats, and things like that. JD Edwards provides many different ways to integrate to third-party systems, and each has its own advantages and disadvantages. As you can see from this slide, some of the integrations the integration capabilities are available since the inception of JDE, such as SQL, Z files, and EDIs, and things like that. Some have recently been introduced, such as business services and real-time events, but the latest and greatest one, in my opinion, is Orchestrations, because it provides us real-time integration capabilities, gives us data integrity because it uses the core JD Edwards functionality. It's optimization to use the application layer logic, which is an added benefit compared to, for example, business services, which uses a standard business function, master business function layer logic. It uses JSON, which is a new and simpler alternative to XML to call standard REST services. And the ease of creation of orchestration, which you'll see in a demo right after my presentation on how easy it is to build a simple orchestration without any coding involved. And because of that, there is cost savings not only on the development resources that you would otherwise need, but also the ongoing maintenance on any customizations that you would otherwise need to do if you choose another path to integrate JD Edwards to a third-party system. What you see in this slide is basically a high-level model on how Salesforce interacts with JD Edwards, with Magic XPI sitting as a middleware. The first step was to set up Salesforce to send outbound messages in the form of REST service calls, which Magic XPI would be listening on. And then Magic XPI will basically do its magic. It'll take the data, it'll transform it, filters it based on the business requirements, take any additional data that it has from Salesforce or from JD Edwards, formats it in the form of JSON, and will call orchestration URL endpoint. And then the orchestrator basically uses JDE AIS server as its foundation, which processes data that it receives from external systems, in this case would be Magic XPI, into actionable business process. So JDE orchestrations are also can be termed as microservices. There are different components that will be necessary to build an orchestration, which I'll show in the next slide, but the basic component that it has to have is a service request. The service request could be as simple as creating a sales order. So you can take a service request or have multiple service requests and build an orchestration around it. You can have orchestrations to create a sales order and a different orchestration to change a sales order, or get an employee information or a customer information would be a separate orchestration, but you can bundle all these things together to perform a specific function. In 9.2.3, in the later version of JD Edwards, you can also call orchestrations from within JD Edwards platform. So that opens up a whole new world on how you can utilize orchestrations. This slide shows some of the components that you can use to build an orchestration. The most important fundamental component of an orchestration is a service request, which again is a series of steps that you would perform to do any specific function. As I said, you can have a service request to enter a sales order, for example. The rules engine would contain a set of conditions against which an orchestration input is evaluated to produce a true or false state of an action. The cross-reference would be used to take an information from an external system and compare it against the value in JD Edwards. The whitelist provides a second additional layer of security for an orchestration where you can pass or fail an incoming message. So what we achieved by using orchestration is we achieved our desired goal to integrate Salesforce to JD Edwards real time with no lag in integration. We have eliminated manual processes involved in keeping two systems in sync, which were prone to data. The user error was not very user friendly. And we have achieved all that by eliminating any development effort in JD Edwards, which has not only saved us half of the cost of the project itself, but also have kept JD Edwards pristine and code-free. By utilizing orchestrations, we didn't have to do any additional logic for error handling, as in it captures all the errors that are generated within JD Edwards application layer, and we just pass those back with the use of Magic XPI to Salesforce. With this, I will jump right into the demo. So what I'm doing right now is logging into JD Edwards, and what I would like to create is an orchestration based on a sales order entry. So the first thing I would do is go into my sales order entry application, P42101, and my version of it for sample orders. At this time, I will click on a button called Record a Process, and we'll start it. And what this will do from now onwards is every action that I take on this application is going to start recording it. Every element that I use for an input, it's going to capture it as an input for my service request. So what I'm going to do is take minimum available actions that I need to do to enter a sales order. So I've created I've entered a line of a sales order, and I'm going to submit and close this. At this time, my sales order has been entered, so I have stopped recording, and I'm going to give my service request a name. And a description, and a product code. And I'm going to return my sales order number back and type back, and my company, which we're going to use to pass back into Salesforce. So I've saved everything. I'm going to log out and log back into the JD Edwards Orchestrator Studio at this time. In this studio, you will see on the right-hand side, there are 4 components that we talked about. Since we created just the service request, I'm just going to go into that service request component, and I'm going to look for the service that I just created. On the left-hand side, I see that my service has been created. If I click on it, it'll show me all the steps that I performed while creating this service request. And now I'm going to go to the edit screen of the service request, and here you can see the details of all the actions that I've performed. The first action that I did was to add, and then the next action I did was enter my values. I'm just going to remove my default values out. I don't want to keep those as default. And then the last section was submit and close, and I'm going to save it. So at this time, my service request is saved. Now I'm going to close my service request, and I'm going to build my orchestration around the service request. And to do that, I will go in and create a new orchestration, give my orchestration a name, a description, and a product code of 55 because it's a custom orchestration. Now I'm going to add an orchestration step, and it gives me 4 options since I'm going to connect my service request to it. So I'm going to choose service request and click on add. And I'm going to find the service request that I just created. You'll see once I click on it on the right-hand side, it'll give me all the input values of my service request, but there is nothing input on my orchestration. So I'm going to use the add inputs to orchestration button to move all my input parameters from my service request to orchestration and click on transformations to map it back to the service request and save it. For my orchestration output, I'm going to click my orchestration output and I'm going to click add all, and the 3 fields that we added to return on my service request are now available as an output on my orchestration. And that's basically it. I have built an orchestration. Now I'm going to go and test it. And to test it, I'm going to go to the Orchestrator client, log in, and call my orchestration. And it's going to show me all the input parameters that are necessary to run this orchestration. I'm going to enter my ship to, my business unit, my customer PO number, a quantity, and an item number, and the version that I was using to create the service request. And I'm going to run. So basically what it does is it generates a JSON script for input, and it's going to bring back a JSON script for an output. And here it is. So it shows me my order number just to validate that this order really is a new order and does exist in JD Edwards. I'm going to log into my JD Edwards environment, go into my sales order entry application, and try to find that order number to see if it exists now. And it does. So the input of the orchestration at this time is a 1-line entry of a sales order. I'm going to change this a little bit to allow for multiple lines, multiple line sales order. And to do that, you would just include a details input parameter, and then you can nest your input statements within it. So in this example, I have 2 input lines for a sales order. So I'm going to just copy this JSON script into my Orchestrator test client and paste it and then run it. And I got my order number back. I'm going to go into JD Edwards and see if this order exists, and it has 2 lines in it, and it does. So at this time, this orchestration is ready to be used from outside third-party system. Here I'm sitting in a Postman, and I'm calling my orchestration URL endpoint and passing in my JSON script that I built. And I'm going to call a post service request from Postman, and it should give me an order number back, which it does. And just to verify that this exists in JD Edwards, I'm just going to copy paste it and see if it does, and it does. So this basically concludes my demo. Next, I'm going to pass over to AJ.
Thank you so much, Zaki, for that fantastic demo. We couldn't have done it better as the JD Edwards development team. That's right down the middle of the fairway on how we expect customers to use the Orchestrator. We are so excited to put it to good use. I am AJ Schifano. As Shannon introduced me, I'm product manager for the JD Edwards development team, and it's my pleasure to represent the JD Edwards Orchestrator development team here today. As you can see, we are pretty excited about this Orchestrator, not just as another feature of JD Edwards, but in my opinion, it is the feature that's going to lead customers like Michelman to be using JD Edwards in completely different ways. As we head into the digital future and do business and do battle in the digital marketplace, we know that JD Edwards Enterprise One has long been the center of enterprises with applications and business data and processes built around it. Yet we've got a whole bunch of technologies out there that are going to enable digital business process applications that can converge and simplify processes, mobile applications, business intelligence, Internet of Things. They're popping up all over the place. And of course, in the context of this webinar, we're focusing on integration, specifically integration to cloud service, Salesforce in this case. And so when we take a look at the Orchestrator, as Ryan said earlier, the beauty of this is that it integrates to the application layer. We've got a bunch of JD Edwards integration technologies already, but the thing that's different about this Orchestrator, and I think Zaki brought it up too, is just the immense ease it is to take JD Edwards transactions and expose them as services, as Zaki called them, microservices, especially with what Zaki referred to as the zero development effort in JD Edwards. Now, zero doesn't literally mean zero, but what you saw from his demo, his brilliant demo, especially with the use of that process recorder, is that the process for creating these is no longer a staunchly development activity. I don't need a Java programmer or a JD Edwards developer. I need an end user who knows how to do the transaction. In this case, as Zaki showed you, the sales order, and to go through and record that. And as we build out these microservices, we put them to use in a bunch of different contexts, right? We think that the Orchestrator is going to make JD Edwards a gateway to digital business. If you can imagine Internet of Things devices pinging data into JD Edwards and maybe declaring themselves as a different status or what they're doing, or maybe even executing JD Edwards transactions. We have paradigms where customers and partners are building alternative user interfaces, simplified web or mobile interfaces into JD Edwards. And then the services they build, these orchestrations, become the dialogue back and forth between the simplified user experience and the JD Edwards system. We can simplify processes by building orchestrations, especially orchestrations that call other orchestrations and converge many, many steps into a few simple steps. And of course, for today, what we're concentrating on is that integration platform, that integration paradigm, specifically between Salesforce and JD Edwards through the services called the Orchestrations. And so, here we see that you've got your digital assets. This is your gold. It's your, applications and even your JD Edwards customized applications that run your business, and many gigabytes, maybe even terabytes of business data that represent the lifeblood of your business. All of that is now exposed out to the outside world in a very simple way. I mean, we saw Zaki do it. I wasn't looking at my watch, but it was about 4 or 5 minutes before Zaki had an integration, essentially a URL, what the integration world would call an endpoint, to a REST API to create a JD Edwards sales order. You saw Zaki do that in about 4 or 5 minutes. And that extends your JD Edwards out to the digital economy, where you might imagine integrating with other web services, and I said Internet of Things devices or mobile applications. So we're really excited about the possibilities of this. And I want to thank Magic Software and Michelman for putting Orchestrator to such good use. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Ryan.
Thank you. My name is Ryan Beck with Magic Software. I'm a solution engineer, and I've been with Magic for about 10 or 11 years now. And what I typically do is do implementations like Zaki showed you, where we integrate something like Salesforce to JD Edwards. And today I'm going to show you a live demonstration of doing that. The idea here is we have a Salesforce environment, and I'm going to use Magic XPI to integrate it to JD Edwards. We're going to show you the pros and cons of, and basically all the new improvements that Orchestrator can bring us based on how we do it now and how an Orchestrator can improve it. So if I go ahead and I want to create an account in my Salesforce environment, I'll just start typing the name of the customer, and in the background I'll show you first that doesn't already exist. So I don't have any customer just named Michelman in my environment. When I go to create it, I'll just go ahead and put in some kind of data like this, maybe an address and a city and a state and some kind of zip. All right. And what's going to happen is when I save this, it's going to launch a process in Magic XPI that's going to call JD Edwards and create this account. And then it will assign the account number and bring it back into here, so it'll tie them together and I'll know it worked. That process is done in what's called a flow, which is basically just a design of how we sync the information from one side to the other. It's code-free, and the flow itself is going to be designed visually in our studio, which I'll show you in a second. It's going to accomplish this right now by calling the JDE business functions, which I'll show you what our Oracle Validated Integration does. I'll show you that, and then I'll show you how we can turn it around and connect to the JDE Orchestrator. So after a couple seconds here, I'm going to see that my record was modified by the Magic XPI engine, and I have an address book number that came back from JDE. So I'm pretty confident if I go look in JDE, that number will have been created. And there it is. So I can go into the account, and it'll have all the same information I updated on the other side, including that, and then, of course, any phone numbers. So how did I make that work? Well, behind the scenes, the Magic XPI engine is running here at our office in Laguna Hills, California, connected to a JDE environment. And this is what I have up on the screen now. This is the design environment that a developer such as myself would use to connect these types of systems. So it comes out of the box with all these adapters and connectors that allow us to talk to different systems like the SAPs, the the Oracles, the Microsofts, and particularly what we're using now is the JD Edwards Enterprise One component. And there's also a lot of out-of-the-box technology adapters as well. So it can work with any type of REST API, any type of SOAP API, any database, anything like that. We've got an adapter for pretty much anything you can think of that's a standard technology. So the one that we just did right now basically ran by running through and running these little boxes on here that we call components. And each one of these does an operation. So it might log something. It might, in this case, call something like the address book master business function. So in this case, in this demo, we actually just mapped the data in from Salesforce on the left to the right side, which is the business function. Now, this is pretty easy for simple things, but if you wanted to get into something more complicated, like a transaction to create a sales order or a sample request, like at Michelman, you get into problems where you have to end up calling a lot of business functions to do that. It's not as straightforward like this one. We're just going to make one record and be done. You have to worry about how cache is created and things like that. So it becomes rather hard to do, and people rely on experts like me to do it. But to make it simpler for everybody, we now have the ability to consume a JDE REST API using the JSON that Zaki did in his presentation. So I have a similar document here real quick to what he did. So if we just take a standard JSON, like the one that he took out of the Orchestrator Studio, and it's just an array of names and values. So it's really every schema using Orchestrator is going to be the same unless you have like a recurring element like details or something like that. And I'm going to infer what's called a JSON schema. It's kind of an industry standard way of defining what elements are in a JSON. I'm going to copy that out, and I'm going to come over here and save that in my project. Let's say I can just data mapper on here and double click into it and say that I want to create a JSON document on the right. So I would just zoom in, drop my JSON schema somewhere or other. I'll just put it right drop it in that file there. And then what'll happen now is on the right side of my screen, Magic looked at the JSON schema out of Orchestrator, and we can see now how to create a document that we want to pass in to Orchestrator. In this case, it's a very simple array of item, which we can go ahead and pass in, as many of those as we need from the other side. Mapping from a Salesforce, I could go grab a Salesforce schema and expand it, and then basically you can visually map from the left side to the right side. We can make as many copies of item as we want, make it recurring going down for obviously all the different fields you'll need to do. And there's just a simple way to do that I won't get too far into. But the ideas of the tool is that it makes integration simple. We try to make it so that you are developing at a higher level. We're not coding, we're not doing anything like that. We're using pre-built components to go ahead and basically kind of use bigger building blocks to create the solutions that we're trying to do. And the idea is that we can deliver a project much faster than you can with other things. The actual implementation of the Michelman sample order sync was actually one of the fastest projects I've ever done, because not only did we have Magic XPI to use there, but we had the JD Orchestrator, which made it so that I didn't have to go and call 20 different business functions to create a sales order like we used to have to do. We were able to just call one REST API, which gave us the authentication. It gave us, being able to validate the data, and it gave us back all the different errors that might happen during the order creation. So that was actually quite an easy project to do relative to other ones. I think we're going to go to question and answers now then.